So welcome back to the channel. I had an opportunity to kind of review some of the footage from my first video with the ZV-E1. I kind of wanted to go over some of that today. Kind of, my findings after the first day of use, the first few days of use, and kind of give you a rundown of kind of what I thought about the camera in general, just after using it for, a very short time. I have some notes here, so we're gonna kind of go over these and hopefully you can gain a little bit of perspective about how it is to use this ZV-E1. First of all, I'm going to talk about the colors of the video that I used. I used a no picture profile, just a standard Sony picture profile off. And I think Sony may have been doing a little bit of work with their colors. It seems like when I've used this picture profile or no picture profile in the past, the saturation was just way too high and the colors were just way too vivid. And especially the greens. The greens are just like crazy green, And I noticed in the video the other day that all that was kind of toned down just a little bit from where it has been in the past. So I wouldn't be afraid to use no picture profile or just a standard picture profile in the ZV-E1 at all, because I thought it looked great. Maybe Sony's been doing some work on the colors since the old days. Now we can talk about the microphone just a little bit. I think the onboard microphone for the most part did a pretty decent job. There are some parts in that video where my voice is a little bit tinny, I guess you would say. When I was going through the settings later, I figured out that my wind noise reduction was on. So that was probably what was causing most of that. I think if you're out doing some just casual shooting, I think the onboard microphone will work great. And in a pinch, it'll be just fine. But I would always suggest, if you can, to get a more professional microphone, because sound is so important in your videos. So we can talk about the stabilization just a little bit. I think the active was pretty decent. I mean, it was pretty much what I saw on all the rest of my Sony cameras that have the active stabilization. And I think it's fairly good for vlogging. Like, it seems like when you're holding the camera out in front of you like this, and you have the active on, it keeps your head or your body or whatever pretty steady. It keeps things pretty stable like that. When you turn the camera around and are walking around with the camera out in front of you, kind of showing what's going on, that's when active stabilization kind of falls apart. So when you add dynamic stabilization onto that, I thought that looks really, really good. As long as you're going on a straight line and not whipping your camera all over everywhere. I think for the most part, it kept a very, very steady shot, particularly when I was walking straight ahead and when I was like on that, kid bridge or whatever, the jungle gym type thing. Man, that shot was stable as it can be. And also, when I was shooting some of my B-roll, I had the dynamic active enabled. And man, some of those shots are just super steady. So I really am impressed with the dynamic active stabilization. Yes, you do crop in a lot, but I think if you just use it in select situations, it's going to be fine. And I think the video looks so much better. As long as you're not whipping the camera around or, moving from side to side real fast. In that case, it's going to get real jumpy. But if you use it the way it was designed, and don't get too crazy with the camera work, and I think it looks really good. So a lot of complaints about this camera is, it's not a professional camera. There's not enough buttons on the camera, things like that. But I'm telling you, there's plenty of buttons. You have the C1, which is a backgrounded focus button that you can program to anything. You have the C2, which is a zoom function. You can go from standard shot to zoomed all the way in and just a click of a button. You can change that to whatever you want. You have C3, which is the product showcase mode. I will never use that mode, so I can change that button to something else. The little pad on the back, you have 5 buttons on that you can use, and then everything else is right on the screen, and you can push. You can access all those functions that way. Or you can quick slide the FN menu. Super easy to slop up and hit that. So don't be afraid of there not being enough buttons on this camera. There are plenty of buttons to use. and you won't have to go into your menu very much at all. The only thing I was going into my menu to do the other day was change the frame rate, and hopefully I can find an easier solution around that, because going from like 24 to 60 was kind of a pain. But again, there may be an easier way to set it up. I just don't know that yet. So, and then of course you get the overheating. I shot an hour of video, had no overheating problems. I was shooting 24, 60 frames per second a lot. You know, again, I wasn't doing like, 30-minute takes or anything, but 3, 4, 5 minutes of 24 frames per second. And then, just short clips of 4K 60, just kind of get some B-roll, but enough to put the camera through the paces, and I had no overheating problems at all. And speaking of overheater problems, I just don't think you'll ever get accurate overheating numbers. And this is why. Because everybody shoots just a little bit different. I mean, some people, they just like, sitting on a tripod forever and ever. Some people walk around. Everybody shoots different is what I'm trying to say. So, will over camera heat? Yeah. If you like shooting on 4K 60, put it on a tripod in the middle of a room and let it, you want to shoot for 2 hours doing that, yeah, it's going to overheat. But if you just want to take little quick shots here and there, I don't think you're going to have any problems. And nobody can tell you if it's going to overheat or not, because nobody shoots like you. So that's something you just have to figure out for yourself. But all I have to say is I've had no problems with the overheating so far. But it was 90 degrees, and that's getting up there in the heat factor. So take it for what it's worth. Another thing that I found about this camera that I really like. Now, I know everybody says it's not a photo camera because it has 12 megapixels. There's no mechanical shutter, all this and that. I don't know. The Z8, the Z9, they don't have mechanical shutters. Are they not photo cameras? Is 12 megapixels enough? That's something you have to kind of answer for yourself. One thing that I'm glad that they introduced, or glad that they put in this camera, is the minimum shutter speed when you're in aperture mode. That's something that the ZV-E1 didn't have. And I just think that that's really nice, because you can set your minimum shutter speed, keep it on aperture priority, and then when you flip it over to photo mode, you're not going to get any motion blur in your photos, because your shutter speed is going to have a minimum of 120, or I set it on 125. One of the things that I was complaining about the other day is I wanted to modify my screen, the buttons on the screen, and so I wouldn't accidentally engage one of those buttons. But I went through the menus, and I don't think there's any way to do that. So that's kind of a bummer, but you just got to make sure when you're not using those things that you swap them on and off, then you won't have nearly as problems. After a day of use, I'm really impressed with this camera. I'm really impressed with it. I don't know this camera is going to be for everybody. Like, I would have a hard time recommending this particular camera to everybody just because of how expensive it is. It's $2,200. And you start looking around the camera space a little bit, $2,200 will get you a heck of a camera. Even in Sony's own lineup, it'll get you a heck of a camera. So it's really hard for me to suggest this camera. I will never suggest this camera to anybody, I don't think. But you really don't understand what this camera is about until you actually hold it in your hand and you're like, oh, yeah, that's the camera I've been looking for. And that's kind of where, in the situation I'm in. At least right now, I'm kind of in the honeymoon phase, so we'll see how that goes. But so far, after a few days, a couple of videos, I'm really enjoying it. So we'll do some more work with it. I'm going to give you a good testament of what it can do, hopefully. Make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.